Hello, this is Artemis_anime, and today I am reading Glued Cuteness by Skylar Sky High and TaroX_X. Chapter 3. Summary. Izuku is a sneaky kitten. Notes: this fanfiction was written as a roleplay collab between TaroX_X and Skylar Sky High. Editing was done by X. They hope you'll enjoy. Not many things changed after Izuku joined the household, except that they had an adorable fluffy kitten that Hisashi sometimes got jealous of, which wasn't really all that bad except the morning after. Izuku didn't scratch on things, he didn't pee anywhere, he didn't cause trouble. He just liked attention. A lot of attention. Shota's ass was sore for days. It had its good sides, and it had its good sides, and a few very easily overlooked bad sides. Like tripping over Izuku in the middle of the night when he begged for cuddles. Who knew a tiny fluff ball could be so dangerous? It didn't seem like he minded being cleaned, which was a blessing, because cats could stink sometimes. Izuku was a very well-behaved cat, just affectionate. He was also very fond of Hisashi as well. He loved it when they had people over because he could get even more attention. Namuri was especially fond of the little fluff ball. Izuku liked her. A lot. Tensei was also one of his favorites. He loved to run around his legs. They were oftentimes warm so that it was a perfect napping spot. Poor Tensei. He was trapped by the power of a sleeping kitten whenever Izuku fell asleep on his legs. He couldn't move without waking him up, and everybody knew it was a crime to wake up a sleeping kitten. Especially one as adorable as Izuku. Poor Tensei. They severely underestimated the power of Izuku. When you're small, you hardly weigh a thing. When you're fluffy and dark, no one really notices you. So when Izuku hid in Shota's capture weapon and followed him to school, he didn't notice. He did, however, notice when Izuku climbed out of his capture weapon to climb onto his head. That would be completely normal. If it wasn't in the middle of class. He completely froze mid-speech, and so did the class. It was completely silent as they stared at the tiny green fluff ball on his head, who stared back with big green eyes. Meow. Shota moved his eyes up without tilting his head to ensure Izuku wouldn't fall over. "How did you get here?" he asked in confusion. Izuku meowed down at him and pawed at his forehead. He heard his students, Ashido mostly, squeal. Shota took Izuku off his head and pet him silently. "You saw nothing," he told his students. Izuku meowed up at him and began to purr loudly. "He's so cute!" Ashido cooed loudly. "Izuku, I'm trying to maintain my reputation," Shota sighed. Izuku stared up at him and purposefully gave him a boop with his paw. "You're such a little shit," Shota sighed as he continued petting him. "I didn't know you had a cat, Sensei," Hikakure said. "It's irrelevant for your studies," Shota replied. "But you're hiding such a cutie," Hikakure protested. "You just get distracted by him," Shota pointed out. "Happened to me often enough," he added, more quiet this time. Izuku pawed at the air towards him with a meow. Shota could hear his class's hearts melt. Izuku was good at that. "On with the lesson," he said as he pet his kitten. Honestly, he didn't expect the class to pay much more attention once Izuku had appeared. The kitten wasn't even doing anything. He was content to sleep on his capture weapon. But the class still knew he was there and were whispering a lot. Honestly, he was exasperated. These kids got distracted so easily. They'd be dead if they did this while doing hero work. So he started dishing out punishment essays. It was suddenly much quieter. Of course, Izuku took the change to climb out of the folds of his scarf and paw his cheek, begging for attention, and also give him a lick. Shota sighed at the loss of his pride and gently pet the tiny kitten. Izuku purred loudly in his ear and nuzzled his cheek. "Yes, you're adorable," Shota mumbled. Izuku meowed at him. Shota gently pet him. Izuku purred loudly. Shota continued his lesson while petting the cat. It didn't take long for Izuku to pick up the habit to sneak into UA. He liked Class 1A and they adored him. He found his way into every crevice that his small body could fit. from desks to cupboards, and one time he'd slept in Bakugo's gauntlets when he left them in the locker room. He hadn't woken the kitten, though. He'd just taken one and left Izuku to sleep in the other. Shota honestly found that adorable, so he let Izuku continue doing it, though there wasn't really a way to stop it. He had no idea how Izuku even got to UA each time. He did a full body search before leaving the house, but the kitten always found his way to follow him. He had no idea how the kitten did it. If he didn't know better, he'd accuse Izuku of teleportation. The students began to bring treats for Izuku in hopes he'd be there, and he almost always was, just being cute and a distraction. Shota turned that into a lesson on being focused. If they failed, they wouldn't get to pet Izuku. It worked like a charm. Even Bakugo couldn't resist petting the fluffiest cat they'd ever seen. Izuku managed to get the whole class to be compliant. He gave Izuku more treats after a particularly stress-free day. Izuku had managed something he hadn't been able to do in years of teaching: get the whole class to pay attention. He really appreciated that. It was so much easier to teach the class when they were paying attention. Shota told his students about the USJ and what they would be doing there. He was a little relieved that he hadn't found Izuku. He was probably back home and hadn't hitchhiked this time. Having the kitten at the unforeseen simulation joint would be bad. So they all got into the bus and headed there. Shota sighed quietly as he stood near the door. He just hoped it wouldn't be a lot of injuries. Despite how he acted, he didn't like putting his students in danger and getting hurt. But they had to learn. He had to prepare them for the real world, where they definitely would get hurt if they weren't ready. There's no point in babying them. They'd willingly signed up for this. He was going to provide them with their best chance of survival as a hero. That meant no pulling punches, even if it looked cruel. The world was dangerous and cruel. He didn't want his kids to die. He would prepare them as much as he... Meow! Shota paused. It's Izuku! Ashido cooed loudly as Izuku poked his head out of Shota's pocket. Shota took a deep breath. All right, he had Izuku with him. What are you doing here? He asked the tiny kitten, who looked very happy with himself. Izuku pulled a tiny pocket out in his mouth. Shota took it and recognized that it was the small packet of cookies that Hisashi had given him. He must have forgotten it. Shota sighed softly. Good kitty, he praised. Izuku purred loudly for a moment before ducking down to curl up in his pocket. Shota smiled softly. Adorable. He looked up and he saw the stars in a few of his students' eyes. He definitely had their focus. You can pet him on the drive back when you were good, Shota said. That gained a few eager nods. Shota rolled his eyes fondly. At least now the students would behave. Izuku, you're doing amazing, he whispered. He could feel the purr from his pocket. So cute. He couldn't have guessed how wrong everything would go. And that was Chapter 3 of Glued Cuteness by Skylar Sky High and TerraX_X. Please go check them out in the description. They are amazing at writing. Thank you all for listening so much, and I will see you next time.